Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to this learning experience brought to you by AWS and TensorIoT. My name is Cody, and I'd love to welcome you back to Techstrong Learning. We've got an exciting presentation ahead, but before we get things kicked off, I do have just a couple of housekeeping notes I'd like to review. First, today's session is being recorded. So if you miss any of our session, perhaps you'd like to rewatch or maybe share with a friend. The on-demand recording will be made available shortly after we conclude this live session today. If you'd like to engage with us, there are a couple of options for you to do so. The first option is the chat tab, which you'll find on the right side of your screen. I'd like you to go ahead and start testing that chat tab out for us right now by letting us know from where in the world you are joining us. If you do have any specific questions for us, we do want you to send those into the Q&A tab, as that just helps us keep organized, and we want to answer as many questions as we can today, so be sure to send those questions into that Q&A tab. If you click the Handouts tab, you'll see there are not only a copy of our slides available for download, but there is our full pulse meter report, which is going to be the main subject of our conversation today. So feel free to grab that report from that handout section. And of course, before we close things out, we are going to be giving away 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be sure to stick around to see if you're one of our lucky winners. So our topic today is accelerating application modernization. And I'm joined by Sripriya Kannan, Director of AppMod and Data at TensorIoT, and Mike Rothman, Chief Strategy Officer of Techstrong Group and GM at Techstrong Research. So Mike and Sripriya, thank you both so much for joining us today. Mike, do you want to go ahead and get this started?
I will. Thank you, Cody. As always, doing a wonderful job as our tour guide and making sure that everybody knows where the bathrooms are and, kind of where to click on and what have you. Somewhere out there, right? So welcome, everybody, to the Accelerating Application Modernization Learning Experience. What we're going to do today is really kind of dig into one of the both emerging and exciting areas that we see in technology. And remember, Techstrong kind of focuses on DevOps and cloud native infrastructure and cybersecurity and digital transformation. And this idea of leveraging and trying to take advantage of new capabilities that really can help your applications run better, faster, more reliable, and really provide a whole bunch of new capabilities that weren't possible with the first generation of technology. We have done some research around there. That's kind of why I'm here. I run Techstrong Research. So we've done a pulse meter, which is basically a 3-page infographic that you can get in your handouts tab. We are going to borrow liberally from the pulse meter today and really use those charts and that data as a way to guide the discussion. Again, I'm really pleased to have Sripriya here with us. So before we get in, Sripriya, why don't you kind of introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background, and also, kind of help our audience understand a little bit about TensorIoT, since they may not be familiar with the company.
Sure. Yeah. Hey, this is Sripriya Kannan, Director of App Modernization and Data. And regarding myself, I'm a director here at Tensor. And prior to this, I was with Amazon. And before that, I was with a couple of other companies with Verizon and IBM and a few others.
Small companies, tiny companies.
So a few other companies. The expertise and things that I bring in here is to bring in the app modernization for TensorIoT. TensorIoT as the company is a partner of AWS, and we have multiple offerings, not just limited to app modernization. We have on the IoT platform, and also we have data and analytics. We are Sustainability of the Year. We got that award last year. And so we do offer multiple consulting offers. And regarding the app modernization, I like to go briefly about what are the kinds of offering that we have. We do have like infrastructure related modernization offering, where we have migrated on-prem to AWS cloud and on-prem infrastructure upgrades, and application modernization, where we have done like a microservices, making a monolith application to a microservice.
Yep.
migrating existing container applications, and data modernization as well, for which we have brought in the data and make them near real time. And from the delivery standpoint, we have also done the CI/CD pipeline, DevOps, and also for the security and governance as well. So multiple, offerings that we have as well, which we can go at the end of the session. But from a modernization standpoint, the way I see it is, um, whenever we have an application, it's a process of moving your traditional application that you have and moving into a cloud native platform where we get the benefits and the capabilities that the AWS offer, and which will help for the scalability and performance, cost effectiveness, and whatnot, right? So we will talk more. We will also have chats and Q&As going on the side. So we will discuss more on that. So
yeah, you bet. And that's an interesting point, because, I've been doing cloud myself for close to 13, 14 years at this point. And, it really is interesting to see how companies have been able to really change how it is that they deliver technology, right? Just become a lot more agile, become a lot more flexible, build both resilient and secure environments, where in kind of the old monolithic world, or even good old client server, right? I'm old enough to remember, kind of first generation client server with our fat clients, and, and then like the whole 3-tiered thing was like, oh my God, there's 3 tiers, right? We don't have to worry about the big fat client, kind of keeling over and causing all sorts of issues on that front. But one thing that I will point out, and we will get into, some of the tactics here, is the benefits are very clear if you do it right.
right.
And that's a huge distinction, because there are a lot of folks that, kind of basically replicate their existing data center in the cloud, and you kind of look and you scratch your head and go, wow, okay. So, you basically took something that, you had already paid for and had already depreciated, and now you're paying, kind of by the drink for it. Well, okay. I mean, that's certainly a choice, maybe not a great choice, but it's certainly a choice. So we run into environments like that. But for those that really kind of do take a step back, really think and are considerate about how they want to leverage a lot of these new capabilities and a lot of these embedded services, right? You just think about AWS, they have 270 some odd services that you could bring to bear on a lot of these different application environments. So, just a lot of opportunity, a lot of upside if you do it right. And again, I know that Tensor, spends a lot of their time working with customers, both at the front end, right, making sure that they're architecting it correctly and using the right services, as well as through the whole life cycle of the application as it, again, gets modernized and then, kind of replatformed and ultimately operated kind of on that new platform environment. So,
yeah.
So
one thing I just want to bring in is, like, when people say app modernization, they always think of migration. It's not just that, right? Like there are replatforming, and also, like, once you have migrated, right, you just did a lift and shift, and then what, right? You modernize with all the offerings or the serverless offerings that the AWS offer. You upgrade it so that you stay in the business and be on top of the marketing and also on analytics, right? So things like that. So we will talk more, but I just want to bring out that mindset change, that it's not just pure migration only. It's beyond that.
And I do want to tell a little story before we kind of dive in, because it's somewhat pertinent. But I actually built basically a cloud automation software company for, again, we started in 2014, right? Kind of we ended up getting acquired in 2021. But it was interesting in that how we architected the initial prototype of the solution in 2014 and 2015. And then, we ended up doing a whole bunch of re-architecture work, or modernization, I guess, if we wanted to consider it that, right, in 2018, 2019, and then really, rebuilt it once again in 2020. And to see the different technologies that were brought to bear, again, if you've been doing this long enough, you could actually take a look at an architecture and probably say, yeah, you probably built that in 2016, right? Or you probably built that in 2019, because of the services that are embedded within the application, right? When we rebuilt the software platform for the last time, again in 2020, it was a largely Lambda based environment, right? We couldn't do that in 2015 because Lambda wasn't a thing. Right. So you could look at our architecture in 2015 and go, okay, it's pretty monolithic. You had different, kind of tenants for each specific environment because there was no other way to provide the isolation that you needed, but then over time, as the technology evolved, as new capabilities came to the forefront, you could tell that, folks have modernized their environment based upon the services that are there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the poll. So we did a poll of our audience at Techstrong. We end up, having a couple million page views per month. On that front, we ended up with about a little bit over 250 responses to this. We asked, 5 or 6 questions that we'll go through here. The first one being, again, just trying to get a sense of where folks' heads were at, right? How many of your existing cloud-based applications will be modernized over the next 24 months? And to Sripriya's point, right, modernization isn't just replatforming. It is, this idea of leveraging new services. It could be, adding new capabilities and really, making architectural changes to improve, possibly the resilience or performance or what have you. So it's a pretty broad topic. We ended up with about 40% saying that they'll be doing some of their applications, 12% saying most of them, 30% saying all. So those folks have some work to do if they've got to modernize all of their specific applications. And then 17%, basically saying none because they did a good job with it up front. So again, depending on how long you've been in the cloud, I think you could make the general distinction that the longer you've been in there, the more likely it is that there's new shiny stuff that you want to integrate into your environment. The more recently that you've brought workloads or moved environments up into some of these platforms, the less likely that you'd feel like you need to overhaul it in the near term. Anything surprising about that data that you see there? Sripriya?
No, I think it's pretty much talks what we see out there in the market, right? Customers have, it all depends upon how the customer setup is there today, right? So some doesn't want to, because if their application is very complex and very tightly coupled, they don't really want to go all cloud at once. Maybe they just want to leverage just their reporting to make it real time, right? They just want to sample it out and see whether their application what are the key things that they want to go first in cloud, right? So they do that kind of approach. Some people some customers just go with the lift and shift first step, and then, then they settle down there and then look for, hey, now I'm in AWS and I can utilize the ECS. I have been the container is being used. So what are the other AWS services that I can leverage, where I can connect with other services so that it's very easy if you're in the ECS. So how can I leverage those? So so customer kind of get into that, right? If you are in Kubernetes, and if you have used Kubernetes and you want to still move into the cloud, EKS is one of the offering that AWS offers, where it is pretty easy and it's a fully managed service. So, and you can utilize that. So it's all depends upon how the customer current framework is and how we can leverage them. Either it's complete migration or replatforming certain things or things like that. So I do agree with the statistics that we are seeing here.
Yep. And that's actually a good point, since the next question that we asked was, how do you get there? Right. So which tactics do you use to migrate, the workloads to the cloud, or even just modernize them, right? But lift and shift is the top, kind of answer in terms of the ranking. Refactored, kind of coming in second. And that's really looking at the application and taking specific pieces and modernizing it piece by piece, right? Not, kind of in effect rebuilding it. Replatforming would be, kind of that whole idea that I'm going to, pretty much start from new and use all sorts of new modern cloud native type capabilities. And then repurchased would be, basically migrating to something that you don't build, right? Whether it's a SaaS service or whether it's packaged software that you would run within your, cloud VPCs in your cloud environment. That's those environments. So, and again, still a little distressing that, we have so many folks that just, kind of lift and shift on that front. But I guess that's life, right? And when I was working with a lot of clients doing this, in a lot of cases, it was kind of let's call it under duress, right? They were losing their data center space, or, somebody had some specific urgency that they really needed to move the application quickly. They thought there were cost advantages, what have you. A software platform was, basically going, end of life. Then they had to go look for something else. So it was just, move it as quickly as possible. So still a little disappointing that we've got there, but refactoring is a close second. So I guess I'm a little happy with that, and that, folks are looking at some specific areas to modernize. Again, does that kind of correlate to what it is that you see out in the field, Sripriya?
Yeah. So the refactoring is more on the monolith. Like there are the application itself, it's a monolith, and also the database, right? It's not just application only. It's always goes with the database that sits out there. They both are monolith. So the customer kind of like juggling, like, what is the best approach? Should I just try the, do a service-based approach for the database first and leverage it and still have the application as a monolith? Or should I also make them microservice and do a complete, migration to cloud where the application is also a microservice and also the database is based on domain-based services? So sometimes we do take a smaller POC of one of their components and then try to do that migration, both the database as well as the application, do the interaction end to end, and still they can communicate with the existing system and try to, see how things are. So we have done some of those exercises as well. Just give them an idea of how this, because knowledge and everything comes into picture, right? Like once they get into cloud, who is going to support it? What's the long-term thing for them, right? So that's where the other challenges or things that happens. But I have seen customers just want to try a certain piece of their application, a smaller footprint of it, which doesn't have much impact. Just try it from a monolith and microservice, from database, which is a domain-based one, and then accordingly we build the service for them so that it can communicate to each other. So
yeah. And I guess because I grew up as a networking person, right, I tend to get involved in a lot of, basically front end re-architectures. So, as opposed to having a whole mess of, kind of big load balancers that you have front ending your application environment that you have to deal with, you kind of move that to, kind of a cloud-based platform so you can take advantage of, CDN services, kind of WAF and API protection on the security side, some DDoS protection. Obviously, kind of that continues to be a big problem. But again, those are all examples of doing a very targeted approach of refactoring to look at an area of an application, again, monolithic or not, right? But just taking that, that very targeted approach to figuring out how you can optimize that aspect of the application, leveraging new capabilities. For those that are, again, kind of stuck for any number of different reasons within lift and shift, as Sripriya said, right? Just because you're in the cloud doesn't mean you're done. Right. So even if you just have to move it up under duress or what have you, then you have an opportunity to refactor. So these are not, kind of mutually exclusive. And just because you got it up there in a lift and shift type of approach doesn't mean that you can't constantly revisit that and go and refactor all the different pieces that, you probably would have optimally liked to have done up front. But in reality, sometimes you just don't get that opportunity to really relook at the application. So one question I have for you, Sripriya, is, when you're talking to customers and they think they want to go through a modernization, kind of initiative or approach, how many of them are kind of proactive saying, I see the wall. I know that this thing is going to have problems when it scales up. So we really need to look at that versus, folks trying to, basically fix broken toys, as you're speeding down the mountain, right? Kind of, you're like, oh, your wheels are falling off. And they're like, oh my God, I got to do, something else. So it really becomes, more of a fire drill type of thing. I mean, do you see both of those, or is one more prevalent than the other?
One more over the other. The way I see it is, right, the customer wants to really get into the technology, right? They feel insecure when they are, on prem and things like that. So they want to make sure their application, but the application is not ready to take it.
Yeah, yeah.
That's where the challenge is, right? So so in that case, right, like we tell the customers, it's just like, we have all these offerings, and we can go over that. We do also a POC kind of a study, or pilot approach that we offer. So we go with sit with the customers, go through the deep dive sessions, and then come up with a plan and then work on it, right? So I see that more because it's the since their application is broken, they want I don't see that often, but I do see the other one, like where they really want to get into cloud because they want to scale, they want to stay up on top of the business, being competitive with the other industry out there
Right.
who is already in cloud. So that's where I see the
Yeah.
customers are more inclined to get into cloud.
Yeah. And that's great. And we know obviously our friends at AWS are, kind of very big on modernization
Yes.
and, ensuring that, folks have an opportunity to take a look at those applications and really proactively, look at what can be done to optimize those. And that usually means introducing, new technologies in some way, shape, or form. So we did ask a question about that. Right? What application modernization services do you typically leverage to modernize applications? And this was a multi-select, right? Because they're not mutually exclusive. You can do a lot of these different things, but the four that we asked about were serverless, containers, Kubernetes, and microservices. And I actually did from lowest to highest in terms of adoption, where APIs and microservices coming in at about 28% of the folks. Kubernetes at 25%. Containers would be non-Kubernetes. So I guess if we kind of added it together, right, containerization is about over 40% of the technologies that are there, and serverless, being a little bit of a niche at 13%. Again, you're in this every day, Sripriya. You're allocating resources. You're figuring out, what these customers need. Is that consistent with, kind of the demand that you see?
Yes. Yeah. So the container, getting into the container part is predominantly there, right? ECS is the one that,
Yep.
we have done a lot of, customer support on ECS and EKS. And the serverless is something new, right? The Fargate, where you don't have to manage the ECS service. Even though ECS is a fully managed service, you still have to do the ECS configuration and things like that. Then comes the Fargate, which is like serverless, right? Like it's everything is managed, even the EC2 instances, you don't have to manage or do anything. Fargate is still getting there for customers. That we have done some of the client with Fargate implementation, but I have seen more ECS and the Kubernetes and the Lambda based, migration that the customer wants, which is also a serverless. So they do that as well often. And the API and microservices, as I explained earlier, it's more of like coming from a monolith to a microservice based. And yes, and predominantly customers want to get there and not just lift and shift. I also want to refactor my application to get to the state where I can utilize all the features that the cloud offers and the services it offers. So yeah, I agree with the statistics where I see, like, I will combine the serverless and container kind of ECS
Okay.
plus Fargate. But yes, and EKS is the Kubernetes, because
Right.
a customer already in Kubernetes, they don't want to really go into ECS or something, where we offer the EKS, which is very tightly coupled if you are already using Kubernetes. So yeah, that's my take on the and it really correlates with what I see out there from the client as well.
Yep. Yeah. And that, me too. Right. And I think it is interesting in that, Kubernetes is kind of rated. I mean, there just seems to be a tremendous amount of momentum behind Kubernetes. But it's pretty complicated. Right. So that's one where you really have to be considerate about how you map out and build and architect your environment that you're going to run a lot of those applications on. Serverless, and I do, Fargate to me, obviously, kind of manage DCS, so you don't have to, really deal with a lot of the infrastructure provisioning and the like, for sure. Serverless, I do kind of consider that a little bit of a different approach, just because you have to, overhaul your applications. You can't lift and shift into Lambda, right? You really have to rethink what that application is going to do. It is, when it first appeared, to me, it was like magic, right? It was like, wait, so hold on a second. You basically just load code up and talk about when you're going to invoke the function, and it just runs. You don't have to worry about anything beyond that. They're like, yeah, pretty much. I mean, I'm like, holy crap, right? What it really kind of gives you such liberation from, kind of a lot of the traditional infrastructure types of constraints that you had and operational issues that you had before. So it was really exciting at the time. And now, 4 or 5 years later, maybe even a little bit longer, what we've seen is, serverless has some very, distinct use cases where, it makes perfect sense. But, for a general purpose application, for a lot of the modernization that happens, you do see it, certainly on a containerized platform, and increasingly Kubernetes around those functions, which again, I've been doing this for close to 30 years at this point. Maybe even a little bit longer. And, as we like to say, nothing goes away as quickly as you would like it to, right? And we don't adopt things as fast as, we hope. So over time, I think, serverless architecture, makes just a tremendous amount of sense for a lot of different use cases, but it's going to be a while before we get there. And Kubernetes and just all containerization is really an interesting waypoint that kind of helps you, kind of get there, gives you a platform to start leveraging some of those microservices and APIs that are there. So that tends to be, kind of what we certainly see from the research standpoint.
Agree. And it's not one size fit all, right?
No.
Like, it all depends upon how you really want to. And it's also size of the application. Lambda is pretty cool. It's just, you don't have to worry about anything, but is it for that particular application that you have? That is where the thought process needs to go in.
You bet. Has to be short-lived, kind of specific functions. It can't be that big in terms of the amount of code. Can't hit on, kind of some specific data backends that are there, especially a lot of the more persistent, on-prem type backends, won't really work with a Lambda type environment. So there clearly are some constraints there along those lines. But as you said, I think you said it very well. It really depends on, kind of the needs of the application. And that's one thing. Before we kind of dive into this next question, I do want to, again, just kind of beat the drum a little bit about how cloud has changed how we have to look at infrastructure. Right? Back when I started building applications, it was like, hey, what data source are we going to use? Well, we got a site license to Oracle, so I guess that means we're going to use Oracle. Right? Because you didn't have another choice. You already paid a boatload of money for it. So you know what? Your application was going to run on Oracle because that's just what it was. And you had other, kind of major components that you kind of had to deal with. What your network looked like was not within the control of the application designers. You had to build it on top of, kind of the connectivity fabric that your organization brought to bear. What the cloud does is it gives you a tremendous amount of flexibility to build the infrastructure that makes the most sense for the application. And that's a little bit of a nuance, but it's a very important one, right? In that you can really optimize what the application needs based upon, again, what's going to make the most sense to build the business value that application needs to deliver. And you use the cloud as a way to deliver that in really a flexible and performant situation. So I'll get off my soapbox now, but a lot of people kind of forget that. They just assume, well, cloud, we're going to save money, or cloud. It's like, no, cloud gives you a lot of capabilities that, you don't really think about anymore because, we're not we're a little bit beyond that early adopter stage. Mm-hmm. All right. So next, question. What are the key catalysts for modernizing cloud-based applications? So why are folks doing it? We asked basically strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. If you see kind of the navy-ish blue colors on your slide, it shows that, interestingly enough, the top 2 rated in terms of strongly agree and agree, but also turns out to strongly agree as well, increase business agility and address scalability limitations. So that's why folks, that tends to be the most frequently stated catalyst on the part of the respondents. Coming up, quickly behind that is enhancing security, which I get, right? I've been doing security for close to 30 years, and increasing developer efficiencies. Those are really the top 4 that we saw there, right? Scalability, agility, security, and developer efficiency, right? Have you seen all of those different, kind of benefits that folks have achieved by going through the modernization process?
Yes, definitely. Yes, as I was highlighting earlier, like the agility is what business agility matters, right? Like how much I can get things out of my data. Today, if you're siloed and you're on-prem, there is nothing that you can figure out. Once you get into the cloud, the flexibility that you have, where you can integrate with other systems that are out there, and get the data, and get the analytics, the visualization part of it, or maybe running a prediction model. So all that capabilities that comes, which gives the business agility, comes from the cloud, right? Like once you're there, you have all this bells and whistles that you can add, where it will bring in what you're looking for from the business standpoint, right? And the siloed approach is also broken by coming into the cloud, where you can integrate with other application, and a lot of services being offered by AWS to do that, right? And from the scalability limitation, yes, I personally have gone through that kind of situation in my earlier companies, where there are certain time of the period where we have to scale our system to accommodate the number of customers that comes in, and not necessarily it's the same infrastructure that we need to maintain all long, right? All year long, right? So in those kind of situations, we have to do a lot of pre-planning and everything to get to that state, which is not the case with AWS, right? Like you go in, auto scaling, it's pretty, it's all happens under the hood, where you don't feel that, where developers and the infrastructure can focus more on the business needs than sitting and doing these kind of work, which is like just need to scale it up, scale it down, a lot of effort goes in, right? That's where I see the increased developer efficiency, where everything is taken care by the infrastructure once you're in cloud, and the developer can really focus on the business needs. What is that the application needs to do to get there, right? Instead of working on fixing or making sure the infrastructure is ready to scale or not, things like that. So I definitely agree with the relationship between all this. And
Yeah,
also security is the biggest concern sometimes for some of the companies, where have the privacy and whatnot. And AWS do offer a lot of security related services, as well as anything that goes into the cloud is pretty much secure. So so I see like that opening up that mindset will help us help the clients to get into the
that's right.
cloud. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you bet. I mean, and again, for just based upon, kind of my experience, again, I look at it typically from a security, kind of mindset, although, since I've been with Techstrong for the last year, I've had to open up my aperture a little bit to think about DevOps and cloud native infrastructure and a lot of the transformation types of drivers that really do kind of result from these environments. But what's interesting is that, again, scalability is kind of one of those things where you don't really think about it until you need to think about it, right? And
yes.
the idea of actually having an environment that can expand and contract as you need it to. And again, that's not something that, you just lift and shift and voila, right? I'm able to auto scale. No, you have to refactor and you really have to plan for that kind of thing. But when you see it it's kind of magical, right? You're just like, holy smokes, right? Did that just expand to hit, that capacity and then, just contract automatically so I can really optimize my spend, right? And there's the whole idea of building new types of applications that provide much greater levels of isolation, which when you do security for a living, right, isolation is your friend. You want to have, kind of the data as protected as possible. And to your point about, kind of leveraging the infrastructure as a means of getting that off of the plate of the developers, right? We have this new discipline called platform engineering, and they're basically developers for the platform. Right. So they're actually programming things like CloudFormation and Terraform and a number of these other, technologies that are there to build that reliable but software defined infrastructure that then gives the developers the ability to plug into, a standard set of services that the organization offers to those developers. And again, you're just very flexible in terms of what it is that you can do. So what's interesting to me is ROI and TCO are not really determined to be the catalysts that are there. And if we were to have this discussion 7 years ago, would that change? I don't know, right? I'd love to have your opinion on, kind of why folks don't, kind of, or have not prioritized, right, the TCO and the ROI piece of the economic analysis at this point anymore.
So the way I see it is, right, you have to have the, you have to fix your application first. Then the improve ROI and TCOs, like reducing the TCO, will automatically happen, right? So the customer is more focused on how to get there versus they know the benefit is out there, right? Like, so that is not the key piece for them at this point in time. They want to get there, and then the ROI will automatically come into picture, because once they leverage all the features that AWS offers, there is, there you go, you get that, right? They get the benefits of it. You run prediction model where you can predict how customer is, if they are very interactive with the customers, they can predict how things are going to happen. They can fine tune their application, do offers as they need, and things like that, which can definitely build their ROIs, right? So yeah, so that's how I see it. That's why I feel that it is not the highest in their mind right now, but getting there is the key part. And also, like, when we say increasing developer efficiency, I just want to bring that point on DevOps, right? Like, CI/CD pipeline, you set that CDK, you use in dev, you use in UAT or QA, you use it in prod. It's the same thing that can run across, and all that, the time that takes to really configure manually, it's all taken care once you're in cloud. So just to add to the increasing developer efficiency,
No,
since you brought the topic.
and I'll throw that in. I'll throw a little bit of a security bone in there too, right? I mean, when you don't have to worry about configuring that, I mean, it's not like the lifeblood of every company now is software. Of course it is, right? And it's not like all that software is running through the CI/CD. Of course it is, right? So making sure that you have a robust and secure environment to manage your pipeline is really, absolutely critical. So, you have a lot of these technologies that, really contribute to just having a more flexible, right? Having a more agile infrastructure, having more scalable infrastructure. And that's really kind of the catalyst that drives that. But as much as we, want to kind of paint everything as, motherhood and apple pie and kind of just wonderful and blue skies and it never rains, the reality is there are challenges, right, in modernizing these applications. So we did ask the respondents, what did they think were, the most significant challenges that they had? Top one, and this is probably pretty predictable, right? But skills gap being, 32%, being folks thinking that, they just don't have the skills that are there. Tied at 23% of security concerns and application compatibility, which is as you're looking to refactor different components that you end up with compatibility issues with the base application. And then data migration is, again, very close in there as well. So obviously doing this every day, all day, day, probably many hours during the day. You handle a lot of these different issues. So which ones are the hardest to address? Which ones does, Tensor really specialize in? What is stuff that customers really need to consider before they decide, what they're going to modernize and how they're going to do that?
So yeah, one is, yeah, the application compatibility is a key thing. It's not just like it is like you are into the cloud. It's not just you won't look into the existing systems. There are situations where there are hybrid scenarios, right? Like certain things run still in there on prem. There are certain things that, so the application compatibility is really a key. And sometimes I have seen customers, their application is too tightly coupled. It's super hard. We have to do first leg of step, that we need to make them decouple a little bit, and then you get into the AWS, right? Like, so the key challenges, as I have seen, is like the application being very tightly coupled, and it's very challenging for us to get them to the cloud, right? And the compatibility is the other key area where we have seen the application is not even compatible. We cannot push them into the cloud with the services that we offer, even though we have multiple service like database. We have a huge amount of different platforms that you can go into, right? ODS, Aurora, even though there are multiple offerings, but is that how they have built their application currently, right? So there are challenges, but we do have a way to navigate through based on understanding, doing a deep dive sessions, giving us a good picture of what is there today and helping them out how we can, it's not just one step, right? There can be a divide and conquer sequence of things that we can do step by step to get there. So we do that. That's a skill gap. I totally agree with that. Because if there is no knowledge of the cloud at this point in time from the customer side, it's going to be like a little bit of challenge for them to get that, right? So we do offer kind of like workshops that they can get into that understanding of what these services are all about, why we want to utilize these services for their solution, things like that. So that helps them to understand, oh, okay, this is the reason why we have you know developed this kind of architecture. And then we also kind of help them to uh, even though we can build the solution, we can do the support and whatnot, like we also encourage them to get that understanding, get the certification if needed, so that they can also build that skills, because once they are cloud, they are going to do develop and enhance things there. So that skill gap is a key thing, and we do recommend them, we help them out,
Yeah.
how they can get there. So
Yeah. So I have a question. How do you address your own, right? Because again, part of the value that
yes.
Tensor brings to the environment is you've got these people, you've got X number of certifications, you've got so how are you guys addressing kind of the fact that you've got to have people too to deliver on these projects?
Yes. The way the Tensor does is like we have AWS event scheduled, right? Like with the latest and greatest services that is being offered, we want to maintain our skill set on top of it, because when we offer to the customer, we want to provide them, with the latest, serverless offers or things like that, or managed services, right? Things like that. We want to be skillful enough to do that. At AWS, we are all 100% certified with solution architect, and all the developers are AWS certified, and we 100% on AWS, right? We offer only AWS as a solution, and the way we are maintaining it, we are being the partners. Every new application, we even before GA, we used to put hands on some of the new services that are coming in, right? So, and also we continuously do this sessions and make sure that everybody is up to speed on the new services, because there are new services coming in every now and then, and so we want to be on top of it as well. So we have a continuous partner skill development, webinars, trainings, security trainings. We are key on that. We want to ensure how to deal with the client security, what to do, not to do, and we do a cadence of like making sure we get certified ourselves, even though we repeat the same thing, but we want to get it certified, ensure that we uh, apply that when we are working with the clients. So that's how Tensor does that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think that's actually a pretty important nuance. And that one, I brought that up because I wanted to make sure everybody understood that it's a problem for everybody. Right.
yes,
And what you have to be is very intentional about how you manage the human resources and human capital that you have, whether you're a service provider that is an expert on this, right? Tensor, all they do is AWS, right? They build applications. They've got people that do that. They're all certified, but they still have to take the same approach, which is, I got to invest in my people. I got to do training. I got to make sure that they are, satisfied and fulfilled in what it is they're doing, that they're working on interesting stuff. All those things that if you're on the practitioner side or you're on the enterprise side, you have to deal with. But the thing that they have that, again, I think that especially as you're first getting into the cloud, that really makes it advantageous to work with a service provider is that they've done this before. Right. Whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're doing, I'll tell you, I'm a lot better at the stuff that I've done more than once. Right. And that's just
yes,
natural. I've
exactly.
screwed it up.
Yes.
I've made mistakes. I've figured out, what works after, 30 years. And, you get reasonably proficient at stuff. These folks have done hundreds, if not thousands of, kind of modernization efforts. They've migrated thousands of workloads right into AWS. They've kind of secured, they've rebuilt, they've refactored, and they've made a whole mess of mistakes. Not that Sripriya would ever admit to that, and I'm not asking her to, but that's just the reality.
It's a learning curve, right? It's a learning there. Every
It is.
client is different. It's not the same. So
That's
everything, it's not like a customized solution we have. We just go incorporate it, right? We
right.
learn from them. We learn from
Of
what
course.
they have, and as we learn with the new technologies, we also make sure that how our lessons learned are being transferred like to the entire team in Tensor. So we do have those kind of sessions like what did you learn from this client, like how we can incorporate those knowledge across
Yep.
every other developer who is a part of engaging with other clients as well. So we do all the retrospects as well to ensure
Good.
that we don't repeat the same or what the learnings
That's
are.
right.
Right.
Like
Yep.
I tell the kids, right? I
Yes.
expect you to make
Don't
mistakes.
repeat.
Just don't make
Don't
the
repeat.
same mistake twice, right?
Yes.
On that front. And to be clear, yes, every customer is unique, but there's a certain percentage of things that can be handled with methodologies and tools that I know that you guys have built in order to gain some leverage that just helps you do things faster and more cost effectively than if a customer,
Yep.
really tried to do it themselves. And again,
Exactly.
those are part of the reasons why you engage with a service provider. Again, and even if it's a matter of, hey, this is what we're thinking about doing, don't do that, right? Or yeah, I tried that and it worked badly, and maybe you can think about that. So at every stage of the kind of process, there's a value in getting other opinions. I'm not saying you have to bring somebody in and have them park 50 people on your site, that some of the big kind of shops love to do. But having again somebody in there, and even AWS has a number of kind of resources that can help kind of well architected folks to help consult on front. I know you guys do a bit of that as well. So more the point here, yes, skills gap is a huge problem, but there are ways to address that if you really kind of think about it ahead of time, can really kind of help address a number of those issues before you get something up there and you're like, what the hell do I do now? Right? That's a bad feeling when something goes wrong and you don't have just basic troubleshooting skills on that front.
So one other thing I want to add is that like to maintain the skill set and things like that, and also we do the competency, right? Like AWS have these competency. When I say like we do services on AML DevOps, right? Hey, we go with the competency as well. So we have around 8+ competency that we have achieved so far, which machine learning, AI, migration competency, DevOps competency. And so that's also helps us when we go to the client, say with the confidence that, yes, we have done this, we have got the competency as well and certified from AWS to do this work. So
That's right.
that's
We've been there, we've done that, we've got the road rash and the t-shirt, that shows that we've done that. So that's great. So the last question that we asked was really trying to get at some of the intangibles that you get from these environments. So these are a little squishy at times, but we really wanted to get a sense of where folks thought again, some of the benefits were going to be beyond just, hey, save some money or build out something more secure or something that, enhances our scalability. So we asked, again, improved employee morale and job satisfaction working with modern technologies, which gets back to that point I just made about the skills gap and having a workforce that is fulfilled and working on, interesting stuff. Absolutely critical, right? Increased agility and responsiveness to market changes, using applications easier to adapt and update, so you don't end up, paying down a whole mess of technical debt before you end up getting to do anything interesting, right? So that's what that one gets at. Enhanced collaboration and communication within the organization, and in greater alignment with business objectives and strategies through agile approach to building applications. So again, when you look at the data, right, increased agility and responsiveness, was ranked number one, which again, very consistent with what we asked were the catalysts for modernization. So that's not surprising, but improved employee morale and job satisfaction. Right. So again, folks want to get those certifications. Right. And again, I'm old enough to remember when, folks got all excited about being a certified netware engineer. I don't know how many folks even remember, Novell. They were a small company. They ended up being a big company, right? Did file sharing stuff. And that was my first, specific certification, was the certified netware engineer. So I'm definitely dating myself on that front. But whether you're a CCNE or a Microsoft certified engineer, or now Palo Alto if you're in security, and now AWS and a variety of other cloud platforms on that front. So again, giving folks a feel that they are working with cool stuff and they're solving, interesting problems with innovative technologies. I can't, I mean, that again, we don't talk about it a lot, but that's a huge benefit towards, migrating to a lot of these new platforms and leveraging some of these new tools.
Yes, especially business loves when we are able to solution, immediately, because they have so many things that comes in. Some of them are very, you know, uh, market sensitive. Like if you don't act, you are not going to be a player there. So those kind of situations, like will, once you are in cloud, if they are, automated in such a way that, even business can dig in and do their configuration, and they don't even need a developer to get into involved into those kind of stuff, which is very cool. Like when you get into the technology there, right?
Right.
So it is not just like the developer who gets the, the morale and the job satisfaction. It's even from the business standpoint, they are able to do something technically, which is, without knowing the inner need details of it, they are still able to do it, accomplish what they want to achieve as well. So it's that, win-win for the entire company when they get into the cloud and utilize the features that they have, the services that the AWS have. Yeah.
I'm sold. Well, I've been sold for a long time, right? I've been doing cloud for, 13, 14 years at this point. So preaching to this specific choir, but hopefully everybody else around has gotten a sense of again, kind of some of the nuances and drivers and really kind of benefits of doing application modernization and looking at some of these new technologies. Well, one question before we wrap up, Sripriya, if folks want to get started, kind of contemplating application modernization, what are some of the first steps that they should, really think about?
Yeah, definitely. We do have a POC offering that we have with the TensorIoT. So definitely do, reach out to us. We can provide the details here. So the way we go with the approach is, we can do a workshop with the client and understand, and it can be a day workshop or a 2-week workshop kind of scenarios, or we can also do a POC, right, which includes the workshop plus, doing taking a small initiative of the work that they have, an application, and then we can use, get into a container, right, and then showcase the work that, that this can be getting into the cloud as a phase one initiative. And then once they have the confidence built, then we can do a complete full-blown migration as well. So as I mentioned, like it's not just that like we do only migration. It's like the application modernization, data modernization, right? Security and DevOps delivery. So we have expertise in and experience in all these areas of modernization. So do reach out to us if you have any questions, or if you don't know like where to start. We are here to help, and we have the experience to do the same. So
You bet. And there's the URL that you can go, kind of check out where TensorIoT is focused. So just hit that link. As Cody had said before, if you hit on the handouts section, you can check out the pulse meter. And obviously we've talked about a lot of this data, but we do have a little bit of, kind of description and some analyst goodness at the end in the report, which we alluded to, but didn't necessarily hit to the same degree. So check that stuff out. And before I hand it back to Cody for a little giveaway, just a couple of events that we have coming up. On July 11th, we have our Cloud Native Now conference, where we will dig specifically into a lot of what's happening in the cloud native environment. Actually, myself and my partner at Techstrong Research we're going to revisit the trends that we put together in January relative to cloud native, and, kind of give ourselves a little bit of a grade about, what worked and what didn't work, which is always interesting to do because things change pretty quickly in cloud native land. So, kind of going back and checking to make sure that you're doing what you need to do and understand where things are going, we think is important. And then on August 16th, we have Data Ops Day, which we'll talk specifically around. This is a new conference that we're doing, but it is about all of those folks that handle your structured and unstructured data every day, and make sure that the applications that we've been talking about ad nauseum over the last hour have access, ready and agile and flexible access to the data they need to drive the applications. So with that, I will hand it back to Cody. Welcome back. I know we have a little giveaway, and then, you do your thing to wrap stuff up. You're great at tying the bow and making sure we all have what we need.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Mike. And Sripriya, thanks so much for joining us as well. It's such an honor to have you with us today on Techstrong Learning.
same here. Thank you.
Of course.
For the opportunity.
So to our audience, just a quick reminder that the session was recorded. You will be receiving an email with a link to access the recording on demand. Of course, it will also be living on the DevOps website at devops.com/webinars, and be sure to look in the on-demand section. The 4 winners of our $25 Amazon gift card giveaway are Raj T, Sarah W, Stan M, and Emmanuel T. So to our 4 winners, congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim your gift card. It should make its way to you in the next 48 hours or so. If you don't happen to see that email, check your spam folder just in case it happens to be filtered out. I'd like to thank AWS and TensorIoT for sponsoring our program today. I'd like to give a special shout out to Techstrong Research for conducting the polls for our Pulse Meter report. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. As you'll see in the chat and at the top of the chat, I've posted a link to fill out our survey. If you just hang around with us for one more minute, after we close out the survey, we'll also just pop up on your screen. But we would love to hear your thoughts, whether it be about this program or if you have suggestions for upcoming topics, let us know there. We want to know your thoughts. Either way, we do hope to see everyone at a future Techstrong Learning Experience. Have a great rest of your day. And Mike, Sripriya, thank you both once more.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Be well.